I'm Georgina Hall, and this is the Phemale Empowered podcast, inspired by the casual conversations I've had with thousands of women over my career in coaching. This is not just another wanky women's wellness podcast. We are bringing the uprising. Hi friends, welcome to the Phemale Empowered podcast. I am your host, Georgina Hall, personal trainer, online coach, and offerer of opinions on all things. Today, I'm really excited, and I'm just going to gush about her before I even let her speak. Today, I am talking to my oldest, not in age, but in years, dearest, and just beautiful person, my oldest, dearest friend, Sophie Nicolason, Dr. Sophie Nicolason, I need to remember, because she is a professional in psychology. And it's just like the Brené Brown of my life. I know I mentioned Brené Brown a lot, but this is mainly because of Sophie that I mentioned Brené so much. And Sophie is my Brené. And Sophie is the kind of person who you can go around to her house and have a nap, cry, eat her snacks, watch a film, not even speak to. And Sophie has been there for me since day dot, since before any of this podcasting, personal training, before any of it. Dr. Sophie Nicolason!
I feel a bit emotional about that introduction, but it's very true.
Journey, hasn't it?
It has many hairstyles. I like the recent one, and absolutely shared naps, food, life challenges, and hugs.
Yeah.
It's been good.
Yeah, it has. It has been quite the journey. Sophie is, as I said, a psychologist. So Sophie is my go-to. If I put anything on social media that involves psychology of some sort, I always fact check with Sophie so that I don't get it wrong or upset anyone.
Yeah, I've actually got an emotional laughing tear.
Oh, that's so cute. She's already crying, everyone.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, we do. And we do like talking about Brené and other influential figures in psychology, in neuropsychology is a thing of mine, and life, really, isn't it? People
for sure. We have deep dive chats, don't we?
We can. And superficial, what are you eating? How nice is this brownie chat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you ever watched RuPaul's Drag Race chat?
I don't actually think I have watched any of it, have I?
It's so good. We need to get you into that. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, great. I'm excited.
Also, Sophie moved to Cyprus last year in the middle of a pandemic, which was exciting and quite life-changing and potentially difficult.
Yeah, just a weird time to move abroad. Selling your house during the start of the pandemic and not actually being able to move was quite stressful. Yeah, but here I am.
It's quite stressful for me because who's got my spare key now?
Yeah, well, that is important. Who has got that? Well, they need about 7 of them.
Yeah, well, 7 different people have now got keys.
Great. I'm glad they shared the load.
Quite selfish of you actually leaving me.
I was actually thinking about when I'd taken your car to the airport or dropped you off, and then you'd actually thought you'd lost your key, and then you actually had your key, and we had many relays back and forth.
Well, I think that I had left my key with you, but I hadn't actually locked the door.
That was it, yes.
So I could have got in.
Yeah. You've got a long way to come now, but worth a trip. It's nice and warm.
Well, I'm waiting until I can have a trip. I'm desperate for a trip to Cyprus.
When it's not illegal. We're not going to break the law.
Well, it's not going to happen anytime soon, isn't it not?
No.
So we just have to catch up over podcasts with everybody else listening, everyone else joining in, which is nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is nice and different. I'm not used to lots of listeners, really. It's normally me and a handful of humans.
but we can't see them, so it's all right.
Yeah, that makes it way better. Yeah.
So Sophie and I have worked before, actually, professionally. We did a mindset workshop, because that's another thing that we often discuss, isn't it? Carol Dweck, mindset. You know, you are like my go-to in that area as well.
Great, and that's it's not a lot of pressure at all, any of this being your go-to person, but yeah, it's so it's something I use in my work, where I'm thinking about helping people understand the difference between like the terms people are commonly aware of are the growth and fixed mindset. So it's a highly recommended book to read, just called Mindset. But I always think it's quite interesting because with many of these things, we can kind of think they're just on their own, can't we? Like, oh, well, I just need a better mindset, or I just need to change this. And actually, there's lots of little steps around that to help influence things like mindset. And it doesn't just happen overnight, and it can change in different areas of your life as well. I often think it's really important to remember that it's not an isolated thing that I'm just going to work on mindset and then it'll all be fine.
There's a lot of things that affect mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
And people say, I need a new mindset, or I need some motivation. And well, maybe, yeah, but let's look at all of these branches going into mindset and what affects it, and then maybe we might be able to change mindset. Did you just have a little choke? Sophie's just choking, everyone. She's just choking and laughing. She's on mute. Mindset is a book that I recommend to all of my coaching clients, FYI, because it is so important. A lot of people, especially with what I do, which is weight loss, fitness, health, are stuck in the ways that they think. And a lot of people do think that something external is the answer to make it better. So for instance, if I lose 2 stone, I will be happy.
Yeah, it's a common thing where when we don't necessarily feel in control of things internally, we do place external control over things and external reward on things rather than that internal reward. So, oh, that new such and such will fulfill my life and make me happier. The car, the Xbox, the horse, whatever it is you might buy, cookies. And sometimes those things do help and add to motivating factors, but they're not necessarily going to sustain it. And I think it is really interesting when you think about your work, when people come to kind of that external thinking of, oh, I want to lose weight to, I don't know, feel better about myself or fit into a dress or whatever it might be. That's still in this kind of position of an external locus of control, like, oh, well, that's the thing that's going to change my feelings. And you're right, like there are elements of that will help, but it's in the short term. And I really like, especially like now I'm not with you all the time, when I catch up on your Instagram, seeing that challenge to people's thinking processes. And it's not that wanting to fit into a nice dress or have a nice meal or whatever it is aren't valid or important. They absolutely are. But if we're trying to think that those things will then completely change our internal state and or belief system, then they're only likely to be a small contributor and not provide a sustained feeling over a long period of time.
I asked the question on my Instagram the other day, this came off the back of an IG live. If I had 2 pills, like the Matrix, a red one and a blue one, and the red one gave you your dream body aesthetically, but you still felt exactly the same as you do now, or you could take the blue pill where you feel happy, confident, and accepting of your body, loving it where it is now, even though it doesn't change physically. Which pill would you take?
Oh, did many people respond?
Yeah, and most people, it's because it is my little echo chamber, most people did respond, blue, definitely blue. And I was like, well, that is correct as far as I'm concerned. We do want to kind of body acceptance, isn't it, over body positivity.
Yeah.
So that it's that paradigm, isn't it, that acceptance paradigm where some people who are kind of aggressive in the diet industry or fitness industry think that saying when someone is overweight that them accepting that is somehow going to make them stay where they are. Whereas actually, by accepting, you can change from a more positive place.
Look at you, Brene of the future.
No, that's you. I'm merely the Padawan. You are the mentor. You are the Jedi.
No, it's so important, and I think that term acceptance gets used helpfully and harmfully. And I think it's really powerful in the media when people can use the word acceptance as a weapon, and as if people shouldn't be comfortable in accepting things about themselves.
And that's where we do link to shame, isn't it? Because we go, no, we need to shame people to change. No, people will not change from shame.
No, I mean, they might, again, but it will be harmfully changing. It's not going to sustain, and it might just quash other aspects of their life, personality, hopes, and dreams. They might change, but whether they're comfortable and happy with that change, that's not where we want them to be, in a shameful changing point.
That's not taking the blue pill.
No, exactly.
That's taking a different pill that I've not got.
Yeah, we don't have that one. We don't want that one either.
No.
But yeah, it's I think the media has such a big impact, and it's interesting hearing you say about like your echo chamber, because that is, you know, social media, how many people, when they dislike something that somebody says, and just unfollows them. And that's great if it's not gonna, if it is affecting your well-being and mental health. Don't follow people that aren't helpful for you. But also, how much can we allow ourselves to be open to supportive challenge, and supportive challenge around some of our thought patterns and processes, and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Renee, thanks, Renee. But that, I think that's partly what happens in the social media world with that acceptance thing, is that it's almost, well, if it's used as a weapon thing, it's not allowing people to be in a safe, vulnerable state. It's pushing that vulnerability away, and kind of shaming people, which then actually adds to that harmful kind of not wanting to accept and wanting to change, but in the sort of wrong motivational way.
Yeah, and you know, I think it, you know, from in the fitness industry, especially if we go for that, people do go on a journey of self-development and change. I certainly have. There's certainly things that I did at the beginning of my career where like right now I think, fucking hell. I was actually thinking about it the other day. 8 years ago, cheat meals were the flexible option in dieting, and now we can all agree that cheat meals are stupid, they're bad, they're damaging, they're unhelpful with relationship with food. But there was none of that chat, there was none of that conversation going on 8 years ago. You know, when I was in the gym, when I was in the midst of doing split body building routines and getting punched in the face and handing out diet plans to people, I would never hand out a diet plan now, not in the traditional sense.
And that's really interesting then, when you're thinking about personal growth and mindset. If you asked your 8-year ago self about what you believed was right, wrong, helpful, unhelpful, your mindset would probably be quite different to what it is now.
I would be much more dismissive of other people's opinions.
I can't believe that.
I would be much more fixed mindset. Thankfully, I read the book. And another book that Sophie gave me, I would say 12 years ago now, you gave me The Chimp Paradox.
Yes.
And that changed my life.
Yeah, well, it changed mine because I never got it back.
Well, I actually lent it to someone and I never got it back.
Yeah, it's a hand on it. Like, you just have to pass it on. That's the point of it. But no, it is. So, yeah, that's a really important book as well, I think. And as you know, I felt very privileged that I got to do some training with the guy that wrote it, and that was really influential in my thought
Steve
process.
Peters, right? Professor Steve Peters, yeah. I never know if it's Steve Peters or Pete Stevens.
Might be both at different times, I don't know, but no, Steve Peters. And I know that started my journey professionally and my thinking about our internal state, and that we have much more control than we know or feel able to have of our internal state. And when I say control, I mean not in that kind of harsh, like, we must control this or something's going to go wrong way, but just in that quite meditative and mindful, noticing our internal state way. And that was because when was that? So it must have been, I was doing my psychology training at the time.
And I think I was still an actor.
You were still an actor, yes. Very, very confident actor, just sang quite openly anytime, any place, and boomed your way around. Yeah, it was great.
Thank God I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, okay. And but yeah, so when I got that book, that was a turning point for me, where in the past, I suppose when we're thinking about things like psychology and mindfulness and self-development and neuroscience and everything, we often think of them as quite separate things. And even professionally, we tend to kind of channel down into one area. I suppose it's the same in probably fitness industry when you're saying about, oh, well, you go down that route about like diet plans and cheat meals, and you get a sort of a pattern of your working way of being. And that for me started my journey of understanding more around our brain and our body state, and how neuroscience can now help us to understand a lot more around our own psychology. And Steve's model, Steve, like he's my pal, Dr. Steve Peters, his model is a really helpful way to explain the brain and body systems in a sort of simple model using a chimp.
Very user friendly.
Yeah. And there's another guy that other people might like to look at as well. He's called Dr. Dan Siegel, and he's a, well, it's not that it's different, he's just written it in a different way. So again, sharing a model where he talks about like the hand model of the brain, so we can helpfully understand our own brain by thinking about our emotional center being your thumb inside your fist, and your fingers around your thumb, making the fist, are your kind of rational thinking brain. Obviously these have really good scientific terms, but I'm just going to say it in a simple fashion for today's viewers. And so similar to the chimp, so our chimp would be like locked in this safe little cocoon of the brain, and it talks to our rational bit of our brain, and they have really good communication most of the time. But when our emotional state starts to get raised and our chimp is a little bit on edge or unsure or uncertain, then just blending both the models together, it actually causes a disconnect. So what Dr. Dan Siegel says is we like flip our lid. So when we're thinking about our hand model of the brain, it causes like a physical disconnect between our irrational and emotional centers.
Anyone listening to us on Spotify or iTunes obviously can't see Sophie's hand movements right now. If you are on YouTube, you will understand that description perfectly because you can see a hand. But otherwise, you're gonna have to use your imagination or come and have a look at us on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. But literally, just put your thumb in your hand, in your palm of your hand, fold your fingers over it. There's your fist, also known as your brain.
Fingers, flip your lid.
Flip your lid. And it's worth checking him out as well, because he's a great guy. And both Steve Peters and Dan Siegel, both models are amazing to help us to start thinking about what is going on in our brains and bodies when we are noticing our own emotional state or belief system.
I do have one massive problem with Steve Peters though, Sophie.
Okay.
I listened to his second book.
Oh, okay.
On audio.
Not helpful.
He pronounces humans.
Humans.
Yeah,
it does.
No H. And the whole book is about humans, and he just kept saying it. And I was in the car listening to it, and I was like, he can't say it. He can't say that word. Humans. Every time it just went through me.
Like, God, he does that. Yeah, he does. Yeah, it does. That's really true.
Once you look at it as well, you're like, nah.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it. I've just read it. So yeah, you put your in yourself. But it's, I think, why I like thinking about, whatever model you want to use to think about your own internal state. It's really important that we do start to notice these things. Now, you and I often talk about our hunger rage, that we both
It's a real
experience.
condition.
It's a real thing. And it's not great when you're in the same room either, is it? We're just really hungry.
We not speak to each other.
That's probably why we napped so much.
Yeah.
I didn't want you to punch me in the face. But when we're thinking about our internal state, when we're thinking about mindset and our belief systems and all the things about shame and all that kind of stuff, the reason why it's really important to notice it is because our brain, as you know, through the chimp paradox and any sort of model you want to use, our brain's really capable of telling us both the good and the bad. Yet, in terms of how we listen to it, we often can tune in to something and totally believe that it's absolutely accurate and factual and true because it's telling us something that might fit with how we feel, or what we think we want to believe about something, or going back to the mindset stuff, that fixed mindset of I'm no good at maths. Okay, so the more you tell yourself that, the more you will just believe you're no good at maths.
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? And then it's a confirmation bias, so you look for information that reaffirms that you're not good at maths.
Absolutely. And then if we think about what's actually happening in our brain and bodies, so we use maths for an example. I'm not sure quite why I went down that route, but it's a health and fitness podcast, but stick with it. But if we're approaching like a maths task and we've got that belief system, our emotional brain is going to panic and be like, oh no, it's maths, what are we going to do? And it kind of triggers off this whole system in your body. So it's quite amazing. There's a nerve that connects from your brain cell to every organ in your body. And so when your old part of your brain, your emotional center, your survival part of your brain, your chimp, whatever you want to name it, starts to get a little bit wobbly, that nerve is activated, and actually it triggers off when you get those kind of butterflies in your tummy, or you might feel physical sides of your emotions like triggering in your gut, and they're really real.
Yeah,
we do feel those things, but it's kind of come out of a thought, which is
that's so interesting. Because the book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's Susan Jeffries, I think. There's a bit in that where she describes doing workshops with a lecture hall of people, and she gets someone to come up on stage and put their arms out wide, like the Angel of the North, and say, I'm weak, I'm weak, I'm weak, I'm weak. And then she will push their arms down.
Okay.
And she gets them to do it, stand with their arms out and say, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong. And she can't push their arms down. She'll push down and they'll not go down. So the more you tell yourself you're weak, the more your body believes it, and it actually physically reacts to that. And that's why if I'm coaching someone, outside or in gym with weights or whatever, and I'll hear this loads from the women that I coach, I've got really weak upper body. And I go, no. We do not tell ourselves that we're weak because our body believes it. You tell yourself you're getting stronger. We're not bullshitting the body. We're not saying I am strong. We're saying we're working on it. We're working on getting stronger.
Yeah, I'm developing that. It's good. It's learning and training. And so our brains are amazing in loads of ways, obviously, but they don't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined, which is why, like, say, we're watching a film and we can feel the very real feelings that we see on the screen. And when we think about going on a roller coaster ride, we either feel terrified or excited, depending on how you feel about it. But you actually get that sensation in your body because your brain doesn't know that you're not thinking about something real or imaginary. So it triggers the same sensation. So that is so powerful, I think, for people in your, like, who you're training, because if we genuinely believe that whatever is coming from our brain is the actual factual truth, then that's really powerful, in both ways, helpful or unhelpful. Because you're absolutely right. If somebody thinks they're weak, they're going to find those reps really, really difficult. And it doesn't mean we can't have the thought, and we can't acknowledge the thought. I don't say what I'm thinking right now is that I'm really weak, but we can actually give ourselves permission to change the thought and allow ourselves a new narrative, and that's really important.
That's why I don't like the narrative that you're going to be weak at certain times of your menstrual cycle. And I find this with a lot of male trainers putting stuff out on social media because they've read it in a book. They, there's no life experience. So here's the rule. You are going to be weak in the second half of your cycle. Well, you will be if you think that you're going to be. If you go into the gym thinking this is going to be a shit session today, guess what? It'll be a shit session.
Yeah.
If you go in with, oh, well, we'll see what happens today, maybe you surprise yourself.
Yeah. And you do have to work with your body, and of course the cycle like affects our bodies, and I don't think as much as men can read about it, they're not going to know. And all women have different cycles as well. We all feel and experience that completely differently. But it's important to think about how you talk to yourself. That's one of the key bits, I think, there.
Yeah.
And if you are feeling really fatigued, okay, don't then maybe go and overdo it and think you're going to conquer the world and then feel rubbish about it. Like, it's allowing yourself to sit with your body and your mind and have a good chat between the two,
and have an awareness of both as well. Have an awareness of how your body feels, so that you're aware when it changes, and having an awareness of your thoughts and what they're telling you and how you're talking to yourself. So, Dr. Sophie,
yeah.
How do people practice that? How do people work on mindset, self-talk, and awareness?
Okay, so the biggest bit is starting to just notice your own self and your own state. And people can be like, yeah, that's fine. I totally know that. Well, we're not really very good at it as humans. We typically do function on our little unconscious ways, and we've got loads of little patterns. And so if you're not sure when you can feel your brain and body maybe being a little bit dysregulated and a little bit out of sync, start to notice things about when you've snapped at somebody. If you recognize that you might be hungry, that's the I know it sounds stupid because we joke about it a lot, but it's one of the quickest ways that we can start to tune into, oh, hang on, that's my emotional state. I've not met my own needs, and my brain and body are telling me right now something needs to change. We're often like, I think hunger is a really important one because it's a basic need that we all have day in, day out, and we can start to notice it in ourselves quicker, because typically everybody's got a story, I would say, around when they've maybe said something they don't want to, when they've been hungry, or when they've maybe been really emotional and they don't really know why, and then had a snack and felt a whole load better. We can commonly notice those things. The step up from that is then trying to just notice our own thoughts through the day. So set yourself up with a little kind of, even if it's, it doesn't have to be every hour, but set up a little schedule where you just kind of take a moment and go, how do I feel right now? And really think about that. Are you recognizing that you feel different from the previous hour? Or do you feel a little bit more on edge, or a little bit more anxious, or calmer, or happier? Whatever it might be, it's starting to just take time to tune into your body at different points in the day and recognize what's maybe contributed to those feelings. What we tend to do is kind of push through, and there's this big narrative around, especially in British culture, like, keep calm and carry on and just push through no matter what, and doesn't matter how you feel, just get the thing done.
And there's a lot around right now of being busy and productivity equating to success and things like that. And I think people find it hard, or there are a lot more distractions and reasons why people haven't got time to take 5 minutes. And it's literally 5 minutes to just do nothing, to just be.
Yeah, just check in.
And if
it's
you
scary.
have 5 minutes, you need an hour. You need to just do it for an hour, because you have. Full of shit.
But it's
Everyone listening to this podcast right now, if you haven't got 5 minutes to check in with yourself, you're full of shit. Can I say that, Sophie?
Yeah, of course, because it's so easy. And I've done that myself as well, been like, oh, I don't have any time for that. And you think, really? Or do I not really want to maybe know? Because
yeah, how long have you spent scrolling on Instagram instead?
Yeah, because that'll just
time you could have been thinking.
Yeah, but it's a good non-thinker. That's the thing, where sometimes it's scary because we might not want to tune in, because not all the thoughts and feelings that we actually have are ones that are joyful or ones that are full of positivity. And I think it was, I can't remember which podcast I'm on, when you guys were talking about like toxic positivity and things. We're not always going to be happy all of the time, and that's absolutely fine. I think there's a big push, for whatever reason, about when he's saying even about productivity and achieving and succeeding at things and feeling joyful and happy. It's hugely tied up in lots of cultural things as well, especially in the Western world. But we seem to have this belief of, I need to just always find a way to get back to kind of a happy state if I'm not feeling happy.
We talked about the emotion wheel as well with that, didn't we? I think I ran that by you, in that, am I wrong in saying there's 34,000 emotions that were possible, that we can possibly feel?
I couldn't possibly answer that exactly accurately, but there's a lot. And yeah, there are loads. I mean, we're really rubbish at labeling them.
We'll fact check the number, everyone, but there are loads, technically, loads of emotions that we are capable of feeling. Yet we seem to think there's something wrong with us if we're not in the happy bracket.
Yeah.
I'm fine, hun.
Yeah. You okay? Yeah, fine. Crying in the corner. Yeah, I'm fine. But okay, so that's really interesting in itself. And culturally, there's only a couple that facially relate across all cultures. So how
tell us about this facially relate?
Well, so when we're thinking about emotions, this might go down a whole different rabbit hole, but that's okay. When we think about emotions, if you think right back to being really little and all through school and through our interactions with family and friends, etc., how many times did we ever really describe ourselves as being anything other than happy, sad, angry, maybe frightened, or scared? And any I don't know. I feel like there's a sort of a generic about 5 or 6 that we kind of get landed with and are often described to us. So, oh, that person looks sad. Oh, that person looks happy. Oh, you should be happy. All these kind of things. So, but we for all intents and purposes, you and I, we've grown up in Western world, and so how we read and perceive different emotions are different in different cultures, because that's we are there are differences across cultures, but things I need to pull this out of my brain. There are emotions such as fear, excitement, happiness, anger, sad, and there's definitely one more that go across culture. But how we then interpret other things, so how often do we maybe look at somebody and say they look really angry, without actually thinking that maybe they're actually really frightened, or maybe they're feeling fear, or we can read things in a different way, but also we can start to mislabel them. And that's where our self-talk gets a bit misconstrued as well, because we start to label our own emotions as maybe we understand them from others.
And actually, the anger umbrella is something that we've seen a lot of in the last year through the pandemic. People in the supermarkets kicking off at each other. and would seemingly be coming across as angry is actually because they're scared, because you're getting in their space, or you're not socially distanced, or they're vulnerable, or they haven't got a mask on, whatever. It's fear coming through as anger a lot, isn't it?
Huge. I mean, so anybody with any emotion, especially ourselves, but it's really important, if we're not great at noticing our own emotional state, trying to notice that of others as well, and trying to label it accurately. So if we think of the iceberg that we often come back to in terms of what we see is this, what's underneath it, 10% is what we see, 90% is underneath. And anytime we think about emotions, so anger, say, is what we might see, and what the behaviors might come with that. So we could go down that rabbit hole, as well as our behaviors tell us lots of different things about our emotional state. What we often try and do is change the behavior without changing the emotional state, particularly with children. And that's a whole different chat for another day. But in that, and in that 90%, it could be embarrassment, it could be shame, it could be, guilt. I mean, loads. If there's 34,000 emotions, it could be any one of them. It just so happens that that last thing that's kind of filled up our stress bucket has made a response that comes out as angry, or somebody labels as anger, and then we think we're angry. And words are really powerful, as you well know. What we start to tell ourselves or tell other people about themselves stick. So how many people as kids were told that they were sensitive, or that they were a bit emotional, or oh, they're a bit of a flake, or it sticks. And we start to tell ourselves that from a very early age, which is why as an adult we need to start noticing our mindset and our self-talk, to start challenging some of these narratives that they're not the be all and end all. They're not our bread and butter. They are parts of things that people may have told us, or we've told ourselves, that we can do something about if we want to.
Yeah, so you're not identifying with your thoughts or what someone's told you.
Unless you do identify with it, obviously that's good. If you feel that the things that you tell yourself about yourself are helpful and make you and contribute to your well-being, and your ability to feel good about yourselves and others, then we don't need to go and changing those things. But the ones that we tell ourselves that maybe make us feel shame or guilt, or when we feel vulnerable that we can't explain to people that we have different thoughts about ourselves because we don't want them to think something different of us, then that's when we maybe need to start talking.
Yeah, the unhelpful ones. And that can of course come back to mindset, kind of the fixed and growth mindset. You don't have to stay fixed with the thoughts that you have, or the identity that you feel like you've been given. You can change it.
Yeah, and especially with mindset stuff, for your industry, imagine if everybody you ever worked with had a belief that they would never get any stronger or feel any more joyful about whatever it is they want to, whatever the reasons people come to you for. But if we think about the basis of strength, if we all genuinely believed we only had one strength capacity for the rest of our lives, well, why would anybody ever go to a gym? Or why would anybody, how Arnold Schwarzenegger did not come out of the womb looking like he did in his 1980s strongman contest. He wasn't born like that. He developed and he pushed himself, and he processed what he wanted to do and how to do it, and took the steps to make something happen for him, because that's something he wanted to do.
Yeah, for sure. And we can talk about society and ethical, financial, economical was the word that I was thinking there. There was a cross between the two. Backgrounds, privilege, of course, will have an effect on maybe where you start or where you go, but everybody does have their own capacity to change, develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do, I think the pandemic year, 2 years, however long we're going to be in this for, has given us a lot of things to think about. And obviously there's been lots of really interesting movements over the last 2 years that have been amplified in the media as well, because we're kind of all able to see everything now and share different views and opinions. And I think it's really important to understand the dynamics that affect people's lives. So we've got things like you say, economical, ethical, social, cultural. There's something called the social graces. It's got lots of letters in it. If anyone wants to look into that, and that helps us to understand all the different factors that can contribute to our belief system, or our interactions, or our relationships, or our understanding of self and other. Because some cultures have, in the Western world, we're quite an individualistic culture, so we think, and this is fascinating in neuroscience. So there's experiments where they've asked, I think it's an American cohort and a Chinese cohort, to think of the self, and they've looked at the part of the brain that lights up, and that lights up in both. But when we think of other in the Western cohort, a different part of the brain lit up entirely, not the self. But in the Chinese cohort, who are typically a collectivist culture, both the self area and the other area lit up in the brain.
This is interesting, because we're getting kind of spiritual now as well, and I live for the combination of science and spirituality.
Yeah, great.
Let's keep going, Sophie. Say more.
Well, no, but it's just interesting because it's kind of that. I feel like we've gone down loads of different tangents, and it's hopefully helpful. But when we're trying to think of ourselves and others, sometimes we're quite quick to base other people on our own expectations of self.
And this is all linked. They are different tangents, but what this is bringing me back to the chimp paradox here.
Yeah, of course. And so we do have to understand that for some people in some areas, when we're thinking about self, it isn't just as simple as, oh, I get up every day and I think about me and off I go. For other people, and that isn't just to do with culture, it can be to do with responsibility. So people have caring responsibilities, people have really enmeshed relationships, people have really complicated lives and dynamics in their lives, that just thinking about yourself can actually bring up a whole different range of other emotions, because you may not feel allowed to just think about yourself.
So Western world, we're kind of separate in self, and
Individualist,
collectivist, and collectivist.
Mm-hmm.
So let's tap on this Brené Brown sense of community, and that being one of the fundamental needs of a human being. Yeah. How much is that individualist culture going to affect one's need for community, to be a part of something?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So Brené, absolutely spot on as usual. There are loads and loads and loads of different theories that have all crossed over for hundreds of years now in psychology about what human needs are, and almost, well, in fact it's not almost all of them outline that there is a need for social connection to help with well-being, resilience, good mental health, human flourishing, really is where we're at, and including motivation.
About human flourishing, aren't we? So
we are. Another good book, if you haven't read it, literally called Flourish by Martin Seligman, the king of
positive. Yeah, we'll link to all these books in the show notes, by the way.
But when we think about flourishing, what do you think about when you think about flourishing?
When I think about flourishing, I think about people being able to be themselves within a part of a community, and having a sense of fulfillment and purpose within that, and joy.
Nice. Yeah, okay, so there's loads of things to do with flourishing, and I'm sure lots of people would imagine it in lots of similar ways, with maybe some differences in there as well. But it is about having purpose and meaning, and feeling that you've got capacity within yourself to have action on your life, that sense of agency and wanting to autonomy, and being able to kind of do things that are that fit with you as a person. You know, you're not working in a situation, not working, but living and being and working in a situation which doesn't fit with you, because that's only ever going to add stress. But all of the kind of theories around human needs have a sense of belonging, or it can be called lots of different things. So relatedness, connection, belonging, whatever you want to call it, as a core element of what we need to have as humans. So the challenge we have in that, going back to your question about individualist and collectivist, both of them have challenges within that, about individuality and connection. And you know, that's something that's really interesting, because potentially for us in Western society, we typically think of that I before we. And you know, it's about succeeding as an I rather than a we. And it doesn't mean, though, that we don't have a need for belonging and we don't know how to do that. But I guess there's elements, I'm really always really interested in organizational psychology and structures in teams and businesses, in how do we actually nurture and promote that in the kind of groups that we're in, whether it's in a family group or a work group or a community group. How do we actually ensure that we foster connection and relatedness and a sense of belonging, rather than individual kind of needs? Or both of them are important. It's just, how do we help people feel connected to others?
So how do we, Sophie?
Well, how do you do that in your group? What do you think?
I promote autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
I bring people together to support each other.
Mm-hmm.
Peer learning.
Nice.
Which is something you taught me a long time ago.
Yeah, great.
And you know, I cultivate joy.
You cultivate.
Try and do all throughout life.
It's true. No, yeah, it's true. But so we often try and look for really complicated ways about connection. And I think, you know, this year's been really tough for everybody in terms of connection. In loads of ways.
Choices, I connect people through exercise.
Yeah, of course. And through your community group online and things. And that's really important. And I think there's lots of things to recognize about what we need in ourselves. Again, it comes back to noticing your own feelings. So if you don't feel that you belong or feel connected to others, or don't feel that those needs are being met in the groups or the team or the workplace that you're in, then that's worth noticing and just thinking about, do you need something different? How can you change that yourself? Because it isn't always about a one size fits all. But it's about thinking about ways of, does the virtual world not really work for you? And so actually virtually connecting to people might feel like connection, but it's not necessarily having that authentic connection that we maybe nurture and use in terms of our kind of human need element. But it could be for somebody that could be enough. But it's trying to find ways to make sure that we link to others that share similar interests and values. That's often really important.
Yeah, definitely values for sure. We were talking about this on an IG live the other day with Amelia Thompson. Is that if your actions don't align with your values, that's where you will feel unfulfilled and probably like you don't belong, or potentially feel like a failure. But it's not that you're failing, it's just that you haven't quite lined up your values. You're not behaving in accordance with what you actually want and feel is right.
Yeah, and that sits with autonomy. So when we work in an autonomous way, we don't mean you work independently. And I think that sometimes gets lost, where people are like, oh, I do loads of stuff on my own, and I've got loads of skills on my own, and I'm winning at life on my own, however it is people feel about things. But it's that incongruence that we have. So if there isn't a connection between something internally to the external world, then you're going to feel a dissatisfaction. And that's where, when we think back to motivation that we talked a little bit about at the start, if we're not working in a sense that fits with our sense of self, our values, our kind of view on life, whatever it might be, but we continue to do that, we're actually going to find it really hard to sustain long-term intrinsic motivation anyway. We might always be seeking that external motivator. And that's tough. We might do that at different points in life because we have to. So for people who may be in a job, even though they don't love it, but they know it pays the bills, that might be something they're able to tolerate for a while because other areas of their life are fulfilling in lots of different ways, and they get other ways to fulfill those needs for like autonomy and connection and like competence and things elsewhere. The challenge is that if that isn't being met elsewhere, then you're going to find that your general well-being will start to diminish because actually you're not meeting your needs. Everything that we've talked about today really goes back to human needs. And the reason why I like talking or thinking about with people about emotional and internal state is because actually more often than not, it's about, have we had our needs met? What are we doing in our daily lives to meet our needs that are for connection or for just general physiological well-being, eating, sleeping, sex life, whatever it is. There's different rungs of that, and it builds up, and love and belonging, self-esteem, etc., creativity, all of that is part of that. You pointed your finger then. I feel like you have a
because I love that. That is what I am about, is finding something in daily life, or having what I tell my clients are your non-negotiables. What do you need to do today to be well, to live well? Mine are go outside, move, and do something creative. Those are my non-negotiables.
Yeah, and they'll be meeting your needs. So if we think about what it is you need to just to daily be a human being, bare bones, eat, sleep, not rave, repeat. That's me. But eat,
that's
sleep.
so 90s.
Yeah. Also me. But yeah, those things are your basic non-negotiables. But when you then start to think about, okay, so if I'm starting to get into flourishing, not just survival, what am I?
Oh yeah, I like that. Flourish versus survival.
Yeah, because that's been used a lot, hasn't it, over the pandemic? Where are we thriving or are we surviving? And so many people are like, I'm just surviving.
I think I'm going to take this word flourish forward, Sophie. I think I'm going to run with this.
It's an exciting word. I love this word.
Yeah, me too.
It's really cool. And I was just thinking then when you were saying about moving forward with clients and stuff, just trying to think about that practical sense. I guess it's not adding too much pressure to yourselves either. Like all of this stuff you can't just be the Dalai Lama overnight.
Yeah,
we need.
I've tried.
Yeah, we've all given it a whirl. But it's to start changing our internal state. It takes as much time and work as it might do if you want to start changing your.
It's habitual, isn't it? It's that James Clear Atomic Habits thing. It's those little steps every day that add up.
Yeah, little steps every day. Kindness to yourself. If you notice that you've got negative thoughts, great, because you've noticed them. Like, we're not ever saying that flourishing isn't about having a range of emotions. It's actually about having a range of emotions, being able to notice them, and being able to
34,000 of them potentially.
Let's check that out. Who knows? It could be loads. But you and I have both watched the film Inside Out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disney.
That is one of the best films to share a little bit about noticing internal state. And if anybody who's listening hasn't watched it and you think you're too grown up for an animation, please watch it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone should watch Soul as well. I really think that's life.
I was absolutely in bits.
Yeah, can imagine.
It's a beautiful film. Yeah, but I feel like we could talk about this for ages.
I could literally sit and talk to you all day. I mean, we do that. I can't wait till I can sit and talk to you all day in Cyprus on a beach.
Me too.
What would you want the key takeaways to be today? Or if you could give somebody a little toolbox right now, what would you put in it?
I'm just having a minute.
On the spot, that wasn't it? Maybe I'll vamp a little while you think about it.
I guess if we're trying to think about what the key message from today would be, is for me, it's about, let's start noticing our emotional state and noticing all the feelings we might have. Not all of them in a day, you'll feel completely overwhelmed. But starting to just tune in and not beating yourself up if you have a negative emotion, but notice it. Notice where it comes from, what might have happened. More often than not, things don't relate to that moment in time. They build up through the day, and then all of a sudden you'll have a snap or a upset or a whatever it is. But actually, we need to start recognizing how we're feeling, to then be able to think about what's the stories we're telling ourselves. So if you're noticing you're having a good feeling around, and actually edit that out, I'm not saying about good feelings or bad feelings, they're not real.
No good feelings or bad feelings, no good foods and bad foods.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not how Sophie and I work.
It's not how we work. If you're having a feeling that you typically associate with positivity or happiness or joy, great. And think about, what is it that's led to that point? Also think about, what is it you're telling yourself in those moments? If you're having a feeling that you'd maybe associate with something you might not want to feel, or you think you shouldn't feel, about shame or pity or embarrassment or envy, 7 deadly sins, whichever one you want to pick, think about what's actually happened and think about how it actually feels in your body, and think about the conversations that's going on in your mind right now, because I bet your brain could tell you the complete opposite as well at the same time, and that's where your chimp can be your best friend and your worst enemy all in one go.
Yeah. One widely used term that is just bandied about these days is triggered.
Oh yes.
And I do think that if you feel triggered in whatever way, physically, emotionally, you have to consider what has triggered you and why. So generally, it's not about lying down and being a doormat or whatever. Sometimes we need to hold people accountable. But generally, if someone says something that triggers you, you need to ask yourself why. Triggered.
Yeah. And that triggering is going back to when we got onto the science earlier about your brain and your nervous system. Normally it's because that's your emotional brain, your old brain, your chimp, your primitive brain, whatever you want to call it, has something's in there has gone, I need to protect you right now. And then that's fired off into your nervous system, down that amazing nerve that's connected to your gut, your heart. You might feel that your chest constricts a little bit, your heart is racing when you're feeling triggered, etc. You might have a little bit of butterflies. It's a nervous system response. And so the reason why it's so important to tune into what's happening inside is because at that moment you're feeling something, and it's okay, but you need to know exactly what it is that you're feeling, and actually soothe your little emotional center. Sometimes it just needs a virtual hug, as we all do, but it does. And if you can, that is the one bit I'd say. When we try and help ourselves or others, we need to connect with empathy. That is the key takeaway, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree 100%. Empathy is key. Tell me, Sophie.
Okay, so the science behind this is, neuroscience has now shown us, and that's why I brought up Inside Out. The key scene, I can't remember what the elephant character's called, the one that gets lost, and he kind of, anyway, him. There's a key scene in that, and it's a really good one about empathy and emotional coaching. But when we actually connect with empathy, we talk directly to our emotional self, our emotional brain, our fight and flight brain, our chimp. And when we can do that, it actually helps us by being empathetic, noticing and validating the emotion, and just kind of hearing it from either our own perspective, our emotional perspective, or somebody else's, if you're listening to somebody else. You actually create a connection. So when we connect to ourselves and or another human, from a place of empathy, it's from that point that we can actually then start to help build a reconnect to our rational and emotional brain, rational to our emotional brain. And then that's when we can start thinking and problem solving again. What we try and do when we fix or rush in to save or be sympathetic is that we actually just, we are talking to the emotional brain, but we're not actually helping it to reconnect. So without that reconnection, we can't draw on all the really good things that make us great as human beings, our problem solving, our rationality, our ability to think things through, be objective. And without that, you know, we're going to just keep creating some of these very emotional narratives that might serve us to a point, but more often than not, they're going to keep building up those things that make us triggered, because they'll keep fulfilling the story that, you know, helps that emotional state go, oh no, I need to do something about this. I need to fight you. No, we just need to have a little hug. Let's have a little empathy, and then we can bring our problem solving back in.
Have a little empathy, everyone. That is the takeaway. And empathy is something that you have to exercise as well, isn't it?
Yes. And if you don't know the difference between empathy and sympathy, please Google it.
Tell us, Sophie.
No, I think it's hard, isn't it, as humans, because we often think we're being really helpful by being sympathetic, which can often be that poor you.
Yeah, and we don't have to be sympathetic to be empathetic, do we?
No, not at all. Actually, you know, sympathy can be very well-meaning, but it can actually keep us in the problem and dig our hole a lot deeper, rather than empathy, which allows us. So Dan Sigal, one of my new faves, obviously, because I've brought him up a few times today, talks about connecting before correcting. So if we can meet at a place of empathy and we can help be empathetic to ourselves and others, because we create a reconnect between our sort of areas in the brain, we can then start to problem solve ourselves. We don't need fixing or rescuing or saving. We need to be heard and listened to and validated. And that helps us to then actually feel soothed, and we can regulate our emotions better. And then we can start to problem solve. I don't know about you, but if you're really upset about something and somebody tries to save you, actually it can bring about quite intense rage.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's because you understand me. Yeah, because you're at that point, the science bit is your emotional part of your brain is just, it hasn't been heard, it hasn't been listened to, it hasn't been validated, it's not been noticed. And so actually it's kind of firing up what's going on even more, and you can then be more triggered or whatever it was you want to think about it, but your nervous system is really heightened at that point. And then when you calm down, you can think, what on earth just happened there? But you need time to then calm down, because again, we try and zoom in to rescue people at peak emotional state. That is not when anybody's ready to kind of do anything. They're not ready to be fixed or rescued or problem solved. We're ready to just take a minute. Let's listen to ourselves. Let's be listened to, and then calm down, and then we can problem solve.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a good takeaway to end on.
Okay, cool.
As I'm now thinking about my own empathy skills. You're not going to get a whole lot of sympathy out of me, very rarely, but I think that you will get empathy from me these days.
Great. That's good. Empathy is good. It's hard. You're right. We do need to practice it and exercise it and check ourselves. Sometimes when we think we're trying to help others, again, it's about noticing our emotional state. Are we doing this because it's our need? Loads of us have the best of intentions, but
people are fixers, aren't they, and rescuers. And sometimes it's hard not to, because people don't need fixing.
Well, and that can be hugely down to our own patterns of behaviour and developmental needs, and
that is definitely a rabbit warren that we don't need to go down into
today,
isn't it? Another day we'll do that.
Yeah.
Another day we'll do that. Sophie, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I hope that people have taken a lot from this. We've given them a lot, I feel, today. All of the books we've talked about, we will link to. And as my own personal Brené Brown, I hope that everybody does take away the empathy exercise.
Yeah, and flourishing. Go and flourish.
Flourish. Go forth and flourish, everyone. I know that's what I'm going to do.
Oh, it's been so nice. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming. We'll do this again soon, hopefully live from the beach in Cyprus.
Amazing. Real life flourishing.
Thank you, Dr. Sophie.
Bye, GPT.
Bye. If you want to improve your well-being in a non-wanky way, you can join hundreds of other like-minded people in my monthly subscription group for live training sessions, daily workouts, nutrition tips, meditations, and more. Only $10 a month. Email me now, georgina@georginahalltraining.com. Thank you for listening to the Phemale Empowered podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can follow us on Instagram @Phemale Empowered, where you can also get involved with our discussions and feel free to send us a message.